Welcome to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we're looking at the NIH National Library of Medicine Chromium Drinking Water Association with Biomarkers of Exposure and Effect. An epidemiological cross-sectional study was conducted in Greece to investigate health outcomes associated with long-term exposure to chromium via drinking water. And the study population consisted of 304 participants. Socio-demographics, lifestyle, drinking water intake, dietary habits, occupational, and medical history were recorded through a personal interview, and physical examination and a motor test were carried out on the individuals. So what did they find? Total chromium concentrations were measured in blood, hair of the subjects, and hematological and biochemical and inflammatory parameters were determined in blood. Chromium drinking water ranged from 0.05 to 90 in all samples but one, with a medium concentration of 21.2, and chromium in blood levels and hair are found within normal range according to the literature. Personal lifetime chromium exposure via drinking water calculated from the results of the water analysis and questionnaire data showed associations with blood and hair chromium levels and certain hematological and biochemical parameters. And groups of subjects whose hematological or biochemical parameters were outside the normal range were not correlated with chromium exposure dose, except for groups of subjects with highly triglycerides or low sodium. And motor impairment score was not associated with exposure to chromium. So chromium is the 21st most abundant element in the Earth's crust. And as we know, hexavalent chromium is a human carcinogen, and this is created mostly by industrial runoff and a little bit in nature. By inhalation exposure in occupational settings can happen. However, what's ingested, three competing processes dictate the fate of CR6 in every single compartment of the human body. Transit through the compartment, reduction to CR3, and uptake absorption into tissues. And the physiological effects of these processes are subject to scientific debate. Some researchers urge that chromium-6 is readily and sufficiently reduced by the saliva and the highly acidic gastric fluid and bloodstream to the liver, CR, which cannot penetrate cells due to its octahedral structure. Others claim that the amount of CR6 escapes the reduction and can enter cells via the anionic transfer system. Intracellular reduction of CR6 generates intermediate CR6 ions and CR5 ions with a final product of CR3. And intermediate ions can produce reactive oxygen species, and CR3 can react with DNA to form genotoxic DNA adducts. And health outcomes due to oral exposure of CR6 have been reported in human animal studies. And this is from water, this is from food, this is from everything else, and the alterations in hematological and biochemical parameters. They include decreased hemoglobin and heteromatic levels. Increased total white blood cell counts have been described for an 18-year-old woman who ingested a few grams of potassium chromate. Myocytic and hyperchromic anemia, characterized by decreased hematocrit hemoglobin, means corpuscular volume, and corpuscular hemoglobin was observed in rats and mice orally exposed to high concentrations, compounds, for 4 days to 1 year. Nevertheless, the animals appeared to be recovering from anemia within 12 months, so you can actually recover if you get it out of your environment. And alterations in the liver enzyme and serum components have been reported in humans after oral exposure to CR6. Increased bilirubin and serum lactate denigrate were evident in the case of accidental ingestion of a fluid of chromium trioxide, and high levels of serum aspirate, amylophreus, and alkaline amylophrease were observed in a boy 24 hours after ingestion of 7.5 mkg of CR6. Now, what they really found in the study area with the catchment basin of the river, about 60 miles north of Athens, both agricultural and industrial activities taking that place. And industrial activities, as we know, is the main generator for chromium-6. About 5% to 15% of national production of carrots, onions, potatoes occurs there, and the river in the eastern part runs through the area, which 13% of Greece's industrial production takes place. Mineralogical and geochemical studies support a geogenic origin for chromium in soils and groundwater for the area, mainly due to the neogene and alluvia sediments and the serpentine soil. Chromium-6 resulting in the natural background concentrations up to 50. However, unusual high chromium-6 concentrations up to 150 in the groundwater of the region seem to have additional anthropologic origin from industrial activities, as we can see here. So we can see in places where there is more industrial activity, there's higher levels of chromium, and that can also decrease the hemoglobin. That can have adverse effects on the human immune system and on animal immune systems as well. That's why it's always a good idea to periodically test your water for high levels of chromium-6.